Welcome, dear listener. Settle in comfortably. For now, tonight's tales explore the monsters born within your own mind. Crave extended nightmares. Find us on Patreon. These unsettling stories promise a delicious thrill of fear. Get comfortable. Though true comfort may soon feel like a distant memory, the edge awaits. Story 1. Sorry I've not been in touch, guys. It has been a busy month. However, I am pleased to announce that, as of yesterday night, IV finally touched down in Phoenix, Arizona. I am posting this log from my first American hotel room, which offers a gorgeous view of both the state hospital and a local prison. Auspicious times drop me a line if you re in the city, or if you have any information at all. Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, Part 5, Part 6, Part 7, Part 8, Part 10. Beep. The left/right game draft 115/2/2017. As the darkness closes in, I find myself dragged deeper and deeper into the depths of my own subconscious, until I sink through the back of my mind into an indescribable place, a featureless, directionless, timeless void that exists at the weakest point of life. I can feel myself drifting away, surrendered to an almost imperceptible tide, carried slowly but inexorably from the world. The rest of the night unfolds in fleeting snapshots. I briefly feel my body lift up from the ground, gravity pulling at my limbs, as I am conveyed through the forest an unknowable stretch of time later. I feel a distinct burning sensation to my right. In the world I currently inhabit, only an echo of the pain reaches me, but I can tell that it was once substantial, unable to divine its purpose. I let the sensation fade away before descending once more into the placid darkness when my eyes finally work themselves open. The sun is beginning to rise, without an ounce of strength left in my body. All I can do is peer through my eyelashes, taking in the vague scene before me. I am in the back of the Wrangler, propped up against a soft pillar of luggage. There's somebody kneeling beside me, tugging at my right shoulder. When I try to address them, I discover that my voice has withered to a spectral whisper, so frail that it hardly exists at all. Beep as. Beep Rob. Hearing my voice, the figure shuffles round and kneels before me, staring into my eyes as they slowly regain their focus. Beep Rob. Beep. You just lay back, Miss Sharma. I just finished patching you up, but I gotta make sure it's good work. Beep as. Beep WH. What happened to you? Beep Rob. Beep Denise had me at gunpoint. Had to act like I was all but dead. When she into the forest, I got free. Took the med kit into the trees, fixed myself up a little. I was common to help when I heard this awful noise. went to check it out. That S, when I found you beep AS beep, is the engine running. Beep ROB, beep, wanted to warm up the place for you. You were in shock. And since the battery Don T run down, anymore I thought beep AS. Beep, no, I mean how. The key, it got beep ROB. Beep, you think I de-risk getting out this far with only one copy of my car key. Rob seems almost insulted. And thinking back to everything IV learned about him over the course of this trip, I can see why he might be. Even in my weakened state, I can't help but laugh, though it admittedly comes out as stilted wheezing, diffusing quietly into the air beep AS. Beep, no that S, actually very you. I think Blue Jay would be appreciated. That information last night beep ROB, beep yeah well. She didn't he ask beep AS. Beep, I am glad you made it Rob. Beep ROB, beep glad you made it too. They build tough down in London. I rest my head back against the luggage beep AS. Beep I am. From Bristol beep ROB, beep of course. Yeah, of course. That S sorry Rob tries to recover his smile, but it slips quickly from his grasp. In its absence, his features cringe into sudden, uncontrollable sadness beep ROB. Beep, Miss Sharma, I am sorry. I am so sorry. Rob Guthard, S. weathered face, bursts into a heaving mess of tears. He repeats those two words as he lumbers towards me, throwing his arms around my waist and resting his head on my left shoulder. My hand feels like lead as I raise it up and brush it against his hair, holding him against me as the man continues to sob. I let my head roll slowly to the right, observing the damage to my arm. Last night, lost in the muddled throes of shock, the harm had been unquantifiable, the details drowned out by the encompassing haze of severe blood loss, and a blaring, primal alarm which had forced me to move without questioning why, now that I am on the other side, bathed in the quiet warmth of the Wrangler. I am able to fully assess the extent of my injury. Everything below my right elbow is gone. It feels almost like a dream. My upper arm is practically unblemished, save for a few dark bruises from last night's fall. Yet it descends an impossibly short distance before ending in a blunt, surreal stump. The wound itself is hidden from view. Swaddled in fresh white bandages, I can't seem to figure out how I should feel. And consequently, I don't seem to feel anything beep AS. Beep, it S, okay Rob. It S, okay beep, ROB, beep. I never meant for any of this to beep AS. Beep, I know, Rob pulls back. His eyes still watering beep ROB. Beep, ILL take you home. Okay. ILL find somewhere to turn around. ILL get you home I can tell Rob S. offer is genuine. And to be honest, I am a little surprised. I still remember our verbal agreement, forged at the mouth of the tunnel, that he would not be turning his car around until he reached the road S end. I never expected he'd be the one to renege on the D-lie M aware. This could be my best chance to leave it all behind, to flee from the horrors of the road before they take even more of me. I know the way back. I know that it leads to safety, to family, to blessed normality. However, as an insidious voice in the back of my mind quietly notes, it doesn't lead to answers beep, AS, beep. I am still game if you are Rob sends me a heartbroken smile, which I would return if I had the strength. In that moment, a somber understanding develops between us, an understanding that after everything we've seen, everything that has happened, we both still choosing the secrets of the road. The decision reveals something about us, exposing a driving force behind our actions that negates our concern for survival and overshadows the imagined protests of our loved ones. A decision only two broken people would make. Rob spends the morning packing up the Wrangler, giving me time to rest. The fact that he walking around at all is remarkable, let alone conducting his usual routine at his usual pace. As I begin to feel life crawl slowly back into my veins, I wonder whether the strange force that has sustained us both, as well as the Wrangler's fuel tank, could also have a mild restorative effect. The notion should bring me comfort. Instead, it makes me feel like a lobster in a tanquet few hours later. Rob carries me out of the car, letting me rest in the doorframe. In front of me lie 3 mounds of dirt, raised slightly from the surrounding earth. 2 are headed by crosses, formed from knotted sticks, bound tightly together. The grave on the far left lies bare, bereft of any religious affiliation. Beep AS, beep is that blue JS, without the cross. Beep ROB, beep, didn't he think she'd want one beep AS? Beep, she wouldn't he have done that for you? You know beep ROB, beep good thing. I ain't her then. I buried what I can. But that was some state she was in. Did the child beep her? Rob goes to throw a foldable spade into the back of the car. For a brief moment, I consider letting his statement go unanswered. Beep AS. Beep no. It didn't he, I did. Rob immediately marches back round, his brow furrowed in confusion. Beep AS. Beep I hit a C4 charge in my satchel. When she took the bag, I gesture to the bare grave. Rob looks as if he is seeing me for the first time. Beep ROB, beep. Where did you beep AS? Beep from your son's car. I watch as my quiet assertion strikes Rob's ears, as its meaning burrows through his consciousness, its implications contorting his features into a look of shame and damning revelation. I can tell from his reaction that IV got it right. We Haven T had a chance to speak, since I learned his son's name. That piece of information formed the crucial thread, stringing together the strange and seemingly incongruent discoveries ID encountered on the road. Earlier in the week, I may have been worried to confront him with this information. But things are different now. We've come too far. We've been through too much. And if he is truly ferrying me somewhere with malicious intent, I am powerless to stop him any way I raise a weak hand towards him. A quiet request for assistance. Beep AS. Beep. I think it is time we had a second interview following a tense and guilty silence. Rob simply nods and helps me into the passenger seat. Beep beep. ROB. Beep at Wasson T Military. It was commercial. The Wrangler continues to crawl through the forest. IV stayed quiet for almost half an hour, letting Rob formulate a response in his own words and in his own time. Beep AS. Beep commercial. Beep ROB. Beep yeah. Explosive charges for controlled demolition. Bobby was in the business. Had his own firm. Beep AS. Beep. You must be been proud. Beep ROB. Beep. Yeah. He built that place up from nothing. Tour in his office was one of the best days of my life. Beep AS. Beep. So how did he end up out here? Rob grows quiet, reluctantly accepting that. Beep have to start from the beginning. Beep ROB. Beep. Bobby was a smart kid, smarter than I ever was. He could have run the farm at 15, but country life didn't he take. Instead, he moved away to Phoenix, picked up a college degree, got himself a steady career. Beep AS. Beep. A steady career. That's pretty rebellious for a Guthard. Beep ROB. Beep. Ha well. We were pretty different people. Didn't he always get along? I was still a courier in those days, always jetting off somewhere new. Course, I went to Japan, stayed there a while. Then. Beep AS. Beep. Aokigahara. Beep ROB. Beep. That's right. Changed everything. Came home after 5 years with a new hobby. Bobby didn't he care for the stories, but his ma had died sudden while I was away. We both wanted to start over, be in each other's lives more so. He came with me to the Pacific Northwest, tracking down Sasquatch. Creature didn't he show, but Bobby had a good time camping, so he kept joining me. Before long, he was doing the research himself, organizing trips, picking up rumors of strange stuff all across the country. Beep AS. Beep. Sounds like a nice time for you both. Beep ROB. Beep. It was. Beep AS. Beep. So was it Bobby who discovered the left/right game? Beep ROB. Beep. He called me up one day, out of the blue. This was about 3 years ago. Said he'd found a set of rules. Said we should try out. To be honest, I thought our trippin' days were over. I was back in Alabama, and he was startin' up a family of his own. But suddenly, he tellin' me to meet him in Phoenix, so. Of course, I went along beep AS. Beep. And this time, you both realized it was real beep ROB. Beep Bobby knew as soon as we reached the tunnel. He passed that way every day. Knew it wasn't supposed to be there, but there it was. He said that was the most amazing thing he ever saw. We charted it over the next year, whenever we could get the time together. But we moved slow, mapped the place out, turned back on the regular. It took us a while before we got the courage to stay on the road overnight. Both of us were terrified the tunnel would disappear or something. I can tell Rob is replaying the events in his head. The reminiscence almost makes him smile. Beep ROB. Beep Bobby's wife was a real doll. Used to work in his office. Kindest girl I ever met. Funny too. There was a decade between them, but you could tell they were good for each other. He shared everything with her, including the road. In fact, once Bobby got a little more secure with the rules, they started to map it together, exploring their own little world. After a brief pause, Rob's expression sinks slightly. The reminiscence is growing darker. Beep ROB. Beep few months go by. I am hearing from Bobby a little less, but I expected that. Then one evening I get a call from the hospital, telling me my boy had walked into some in Phoenix. Beep AS. Beep, was he okay? Beep ROB. Beep no. He was in a bad way. Leg all busted up, delirious, asking for Marjorie. They found her bag in his car, but she was nowhere to be found. Beep AS. Beep Bobby lost her on the road. Beep ROB. Beep yeah. That's right. Beep AS. Beep on our second night here. After we lost Ace, you told me the road had never hurt anyone before. Beep ROB. Beep well. That wasn't a lie, at least. It wasn't the road that got Beep AS. Beep, what do you mean? Beep ROB. Beep, they made it to the forest. None of us had got that far before. But this time, they pushed a little further than usual. Beep AS. Beep, do you know why? Beep ROB. Beep, they were gonna have a kid. Marjorie was almost due, wasn't travelin' so well. I think they knew they wouldn't be hitting the road for a while. It was like a last hurrah, I guess. Beep AS. Beep. But only Bobby came back. Beep ROB. Beep. They explored the woods till nightfall, when Bobby said they had to turn back Marjorie. Didn't he want to? He never told me why, never told me what happened. By the end of that trip, Marjorie was still out there, and he was in a hospital bed. Rob takes a moment to collect himself, to put the facts in order. The trees are starting to grow thin. Sunlight bursting through the widening gaps in the canopy. It looks like we re nearing the forest S and beep ROB. Beep Bobby took a month or so to recover. Boy was desperate to get his wife back. And of course he'd become a suspect in her disappearance. Needless to say, the first thing he did was head onto the road to find Marjorie Beep A.S. Beep. But he didn't T-beep R.O.B. Beep, nope, no, he found her. Just a little sooner than he thought I. Take a moment to process Rob S. implication. Suddenly, I feel a stone drop in my stomach. Beep A.S. Beep. She was on the 34th turn. Rob nods, solemnly. Beep R.O.B. Beep. Wasn't T the woman he knew, of course. Stood there all day, just mumbling about the road. Didn't T even recognize him? I remember he called me up right after he first saw her there. His heart breaking. He tried almost every day from then on, always stopping at that turn. He'd yell, he'd plead. He'd bring pictures and gifts, but she never responded. Don't know if it was really her, but whatever was on that corner, it belonged to the road. Beep R.O.B. Beep Bobby lost something of himself on that corner. After a while, his fascination with the game turned sour, turned to hate. He thought the road was something evil, that it had no place linking into our world. Beep R.O.B. Beep. I was checking up on him at that point. Every few days or so, one weekend, he said he was doing better. Even said he'd been in to work. I thought maybe things were turning round. But then he went quiet. Didn't he pick up his phone for 3 days? I had my place in Phoenix by that point, and a spare key to his house. That's where I found the note, telling me he'd gone back through. One last bid to find his wife. And if he couldn't bring her back, well, Beep A.S. Beep. He was going to destroy the tunnel. Beep R.O.B. Beep. Cut the road off from the world. I played the game in Phoenix, Chicago, a few different places. But that one tunnel is what links you to the road. I looked around his garage, found the box for a phone, lot of electronics all over the place. Pretty clear what he'd done. So I jump in my car, we pass out of the forest onto a long, narrow road. In the distance, I can see our route winding up a towering wall of sandstone, disappearing into a set of rolling mountains. Beep R.O.B. Beep. He passed me on his way back, just before I hit jubilation, thundering down the road at full speed, driven like crazy. That's when I knew he hadn't found her, that he was going to take out the tunnel, end the game once and for all. Beep A.S. Beep. But he never got that far. Beep R.O.B. Beep. I tried to talk to him, called his cell, tried the radio frequencies. There was a number on the SIM card documentation that he had. Beep, help me. I even messaged him on that one. In the end, it was just me and him, racing back to Phoenix. He was faster than me, but I was driven better. After few bad corners, I caught up Beep AS. Beep, you ran him off the road. Rob stares out at the faraway ridges, his hands grasping the steering wheel. Beep ROB, Beep cell service. Don T, work through the tunnel. He knew that. He was either going to blow it up on this side, or while he was in there. Beep AS. Beep, so you were trying to save him, or save yourself? Beep ROB, Beep neither. I was trying to save the road. Say what you want about this place, Miss Sharma, but it's a doorway out of everything we ever known. It's the road out of reality. It may be the most significant frontier we ever cross. And that part of me knew that was too important for one man to take away for the second time today. Rob battles back tears, and for the second time he fails. They roll silently down his cheek as he continues on. Beep ROB, Beep. He was more injured than I thought. He hurt himself bad before he reached me. That's why he was headed to the tunnel so quick. He wanted to destroy it while he still could. Beep ROB, Beep. The road had taken almost everything from him. And then I took the rest. I denied him his hope, took away his chance to leave the world on his own terms. In the end, he didn't even seem angry. He just asked after Marjorie, asked me why she did it, why she left. I laid him to rest there, visited the place often, but I never had a good answer for him. That's when I started prepping the next run. Beep AS. Beep, so you posted his logs online and pretended to discover them. Beep ROB, Beep. Thought people would ask less questions that way. Beep AS. Beep. And where did we all fit into this? Why did you bring us here with you? Beep ROB, Beep. I guess I thought it was time the world knew. Didn't he want all this to end up an old man's secret? Honest to Beep, if I knew the road was gonna, I swear, I never would have brought you here. Rob's features tighten, all his shame and guilt rising to the fore. I can't say it isn't he deserved, despite his intentions, despite his penitence. The man had blinded himself to clear dangers, hurt those closest to him, and on a road where secrets had killed so many, he kept the most significant one of all well. Perhaps not the most significant. Beep AS. Beep, you didn't bring us here. Rob turns to me, confused. Beep AS. Beep, I met someone in the forest last night, a figure, just like the one you saw in Japan. Looked like static you see on a TV screen. I think it was you, Rob. I think I saw you, and I think that all those years ago, in my current state, the mechanics of the event and their stunning implications lie beyond my explanatory capacity. In the end, I just raise my lost right arm and wait for Rob to make the connection. A moment later, The car screeches to a halt. Rob stares straight ahead, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. I am aware that beneath his stone-set features, every square inch of gray matter is fighting to process the fresh revelation. If it is true that, in those quiet woods, I somehow reached across the decades to a young Rob Guthard, then it changes everything. The twisting narratives that led us to this point, Rob S. burgeoning obsession, his son S. tragic fate, they all took root in that single moment, more than a decade prior to my own birth. ID placed us on the path which would lead me to his door, as chaotic as the road often seems. That moment in the forest hints at something deeper, something intentional. Rob steps out of the car for a while, before wordlessly climbing back in and firing up the Wrangler. From that point on, we continue as two silent passengers, lost in thought. Disappearing into the sandstone mountains, we travel across the thin mountain road for the next 2 hours. A wall of crooked rock hemming us in when we pass onto the other side, and the outcrop falls away. The landscape below us has changed completely, and we retreated to a strange and breathtaking sight. The Wrangler is traversing the cliffs above a vast, flat desert, a tundra of vibrant orange stretching as far as the eye can see. I can just make out the road, cutting a meandering path through the sand far below us. At the center of this otherwise featureless expanse, a collection of monolithic structures, towering columns of glass and metal, rise from the ground, connected by a web of long perpendicular streets. Beep, A-S. Beep. There, S, a city there. S, a city on the road. Rob keeps his eyes forward. Despite the epic majesty of the cityscape below us, I can tell that his mind is elsewhere, that he is still digesting the contents of our interview. In the end, I think it best to leave him alone with his thoughts. We stay on the mountain for another 20 minutes before finally winding down to the desert floor. The space ahead of us is two-tone, the sharp saffron of the desert and the deep blue sky, separated by a thin, even horizon. The only objects that cross this perfect boundary are the hulking gray towers of the city, rising from the sand and bursting through into the heavens. We snake along the desert road, the city looming ever larger as we make our tentative approach toward the border. There is an eerie contrast to the threshold as we cross it. The cupreous glow of the sand switches to gray. The scorching heat instantly cools. And perhaps most notably, what little sound there was is negated entirely as we delve down an empty, perfectly maintained throughway. I realize that I can't hear anything at all, except for the Wrangler S steady rumblings. Beep, A-S. Beep, it s quiet beep, R-O-B. Beep, that s fine by me beep, A-S. Beep, who do you think built this place? Beep, R-O-B. Beep, I don't know. Maybe whatever brought us here could be that no one built it. Maybe it just is I wonder if he s right. It s hard to think such a place would exist for any practical purpose. The city looks off somehow, as if it was built from conjecture by an architect who had only heard of cities through poorly translated rumor. All the broad features are present: skyscrapers, lampposts, window cleaning platforms, but nothing deeper. It is an empty shell, an ornament in the middle of the desert as we turn down the next few roads. I stare up at the monolithic structures, each one standing at least 100 stories tall. My eyes track back down the countless strata of dark windows as I contemplate what it might be like to live in such a place when I reach the ground floor. I am presented with my answer there. S, a young man standing at the ground floor window, his hand resting against the glass. He is wearing a dark gray suit and a look of almost mesmeric shock, his mouth open, his hands shaking, his unblinking eyes staring past us as the Wrangler rolls by. My eyes quickly track back up the skyscraper S-glass facade, scrutinizing each row of windows in turn. I naively hoped the buildings would be empty, that this place would be nothing more than a colossal ghost town. Now that I know otherwise, each pane of glass feels like a dark pool of water, still on the surface, but with sinister potential lurking within its depths. Say, few seconds later, more of them arrive. There aren't many at first, just a few scattered figures stepping up to their windows, pressing themselves against to the glass. However, like a light sprinkling of rain that erupts into a downpour, the frequency of their arrival quickly doubles, then triples, until not a single space lies unoccupied. The Wrangler shrinks, subject to the scrutiny of countless individuals. On every floor, in every window, all of them clad in the same monochromatic formal wear, and staring down at us like the emissaries of a grand tribunal. As the Wrangler passes by, they continue to stare straight ahead, though it is clear they re-aware of our presence. Beep, A-S. Beep, Rob. Rob there, S-beep, R-O-B. Beep, I see M. Rob puts his foot down, shedding the weight of 1,000 pairs of eyes as he leaves the building behind. As the final column of windows slips by us, I glance back, hoping to see them return to the depths of the building. Instead, in those last few moments, I witness their collective demeanor fracture into a desperate frenzy, their mouths opening in a silent scream as they slam their fists against the glass. Turning back around, I stare into the buildings that currently flank our vehicle. The figures have already arrived at the windows, and their calm is already fading. Beep AS. Beep Rob. We need to go faster. Beep ROB. Beep IM. On it the Wrangler growls with renewed ferocity as Rob plants his foot onto the gas. We lurch towards the next corner, accelerating down the road as Rob scans for any hidden turns. I achingly shift in my seat, keeping an eye on the scene developing in our wake. Shards of broken window begin to rain onto the asphalt, watching the shattered pieces tumble through the air. It is apparent that the quiet in this city isn't simply due to a lack of activity. The torrent of splintered glass is completely silent, even as it crashes against the impervious ground. Nothing in this city makes a noise. Nothing except us. The thunderous engine of the Wrangler has never sounded so loud. Looking up, I witness hundreds of hands gripping the shattered window frames, unable to turn myself away as thousands of polished black shoes step over the threshold. The figures stream out from every floor, forming an incomprehensible deluge of humanity. The first wave strikes the ground, with more and more landing against them. A heap of tangled figures struggling to separate themselves, much like the residents of Jubilation and everyone else we've encountered on the road. They appear impervious to the fatal harm such an act should impart. Those that landed on their feet hardly even stop, turning towards us and sprinting after the Wrangler. It doesn't take long for the rest of the writhing mass to resolve itself, its constituent individuals joining the frantic stampede. Their chaotic charge and desperate screams, bereft of any perceivable sound even in the midst of the frenzied pursuit. As a foreboding shower of glass falls from every building we pass, the world outside remains silent. The chaos made even more incomprehensible, framed against the ungodly stillness in which it takes place. Rob screeches around the corner, drifting onto a long and open street. The roadway ahead is flanked by skyscrapers, disappearing to a narrow vanishing point. As we race down this next stretch of road towards a large intersection, the ever-growing mob bursts onto the street behind us, taking the corner with supreme coordination and continuing tirelessly in our direction a split second later. I am struck by an abrupt and pervasive idea. It feels unlike any thought I've ever had before, less of a notion and more a prescient hybrid of intuition and déjà vu, as if the course of action we must take is obvious to me, despite my not knowing why. I force my voice above a grating whisper. Beep AS. Beep Rob. We need to drop something behind us, something loud. Beep ROB. Beep, what were you thinkin'? Beep AS. Beep I. You just have to trust me, okay? We still have most of the plastic explosive could you beep, R-O-B, beep nah. If you took out the blasting cap, I ain't got time to make a new one. Rob S. glances into the rear view, then back to the road. I can almost hear the gears turning in his head beep, R-O-B, beep. But that the only explosive on board. Think you can drive. Beep A.S. Beep. I guess we can find out the car thunders across the tarmac as I clumsily grasp the wheel, shifting myself over and working my foot onto the accelerator. Rob lifts himself away and climbs past me into the back of the Wrangler. In my weak state, every shuddering motion makes my bones rattle. With each subsequent gear shift, I am forced to take my remaining hand off the wheel and reach across to the stick. The effort is precarious and awkward, my aching limbs puppeteered by willpower and adrenaline. Every passing second a battle to maintain control the windows up ahead are starting to fracture. The noise of the Wrangler is carrying, and the entire city is starting to preempt our arrival. Behind me, I can hear the ripping of duct tape, the tearing of fabric, and the clattering of falling luggage. I am not sure what is taking place behind me. I just have to trust that Rob has a plan. I hear the back door swing open just before we reach the intersection. A metallic scraping along the Wrangler S floor, and a pained grunt from Rob as he throws something onto the road behind us reaching the crossroads. I slide my hand along the wheel and twist it sharply to the right as the car lurches round and onto the next road. I feel my heart sink dramatically. We've been overtaken. The windows ahead of us are shattered. The front doors lay broken on the street, and the building S desperate inhabitants are rushing towards us. Blocking off our only means of escape, I slam my foot onto the brake, and the Wrangler shudders to a halt, the engine stalling and cutting out. The streets are now spilling over, an overwhelming swarm converging on our position from 4 directions. I look back to Rob, and he meets my gaze, his eyes brimming with dismayed finality and explosion, shudders through the air behind us. I look out the back window to see a shattered jerry can, one of Rob S. now superfluous fuel reserves, its dark green shell violently compromised, its contents spilled out across the road and cast a light. Now that the engine isn't running, the echo of the blast and roar of the primal balletic flame fills the afternoon ere the trajectory of the maddened crowd changes instantaneously. The silent Wrangler has fallen from their collective attention as they refocus onto the smoldering flames. Those up ahead continue to rush past us, streaming around the Wrangler as they scramble to the spilled pool of gasoline, digging their hands into the blaze, grasping hopelessly at the fire-delicately careful not to make a single shred of noise. I climb out of the driver's seat, joining Rob in the back of the Wrangler. He addresses me in a confused whisper. Beep, R-O-B. Beep, why Dante they care about us. What are they doing? Beep, A-S. Beep it as the sound. They want it for themselves. I, Dante, how I am so sure. But I know that it is the case. The jerry can creaks and screams as the city dwellers tear it into smaller and smaller pieces, frantically examining every jagged scrap with each passing second. As the fire dies down, the crowd grows increasingly distressed, as if a precious commodity is slipping through their fingers. Beep, A-S. Beep, they don't understand it. They LL pull it apart, trying to figure it out. And they LL never get any closer. And then it LL be quiet again. Beep, R-O-B, beep. Where you getting this from? Beep, A-S. Beep, I don't know. Just a feeling. Beep, R-O-B, beep. Well, pretty sure they would have pulled us apart too. I.D. say we re pretty lucky. Beep, A-S. Beep, ha. Yeah, pretty lucky as the last of the gasoline is eaten up and the fire dies away. The city dwellers remain in the streets, devoid of their momentary sense of purpose, their prize vanishing into the ether. The crowd's desperation fades into a hushed despondency. I watch them as they pass by, countless faces racked with sorrow, their aimless shuffling forming a lonesome sea, a grayscale ocean that spans the desolate city. The Wrangler is now adrift in the center of that ocean. It is clear that any attempt to start the engine would bring the entire city down on us, reigniting their futile hope, causing them to tear through the car and anything inside it for the foreseeable future. We completely stranded. Beep, R-O-B. Beep, don't worry about it. Okay. Beep, A-S. Beep, I don't think they were going to leave Rob. Beep, R-O-B. Beep, they LL leave. Beep, A-S. Beep, okay. And what then? They LL still be everywhere. Beep, R-O-B. Beep, hey. We re a smart pair. We LL think of something in the eerie, pervasive calm that surrounds us. I sit myself down next to Rob and lean back against the wall, with nothing else to do but wait for our situation to change. After watching the figures outside for over an hour, the only thing that is different is a strange needling sensation that feels like it is emanating from now absent forearm. Beep, A-S. Beep, my arm hurts. How is that possible? Beep, R-O-B. Beep, don't worry. That S of it S called phantom limb. You got some sensation, right? Like you still got something there. A lot of people get that after amputations. Here Rob reaches into his medical kit and retracts a blue jar of tablets, twisting off the cap. He shakes 2 pills free. Beep, R-O-B. Beep, you gonna need these for the pain. I stare at the tablets for a moment, before collecting them from his open palm, he passes me his canteen, and I swallow them down in 2 weak gulps. Beep AS. Beep, you have a lot of experience with amputations. Beep ROB. Beep, more than you think my brow furrows, though I meant my remark as a passing jibe. Rob S. response rings with a strange sincerity. It takes me a moment to realize why. That is Beep AS. Beep, I forgot. You were drafted. You never talked about it. Beep ROB. Beep, been thinking about it. A lot, though. Bunch of strangers brought together under false pretenses. Told that we were serving a grand purpose by some old liar. Guess it s interestin' how time repeats itself, now that I think about it. He drove a cheap 2 Beep AS. Beep Rob, I told you. You didn't he bring us here. Beep ROB. Beep, that Don T changed nothing. Don T changed what I did to you, to Bobby, to any of them. Maybe you were there in the forest, but I was the one who started this. The one who kept asking what was at the end of the road. Beep AS. Beep, what do you think is at the end. Rob. Beep ROB. Beep startin' to think that A&T for me to know. I been movin' from place to place so long, seen everyone else settle down. Far as I can see, the end of the road is just wherever you decide to stop. I rest my head on Rob S. shoulder. He gently places his arm around me. It isn't long before medication starts to take effect, quietly overtaking my already weakened constitution. The pain subsides, dulled along with the rest of my senses. The sun is still streaming through the windshield. As my eyes begin to drift shut, I watch the figures pass the window. My eyelids getting weaker. Beep AS. Beep, I don't want this to be the end. Rob. Beep ROB. Beep, I know Miss Sharma. I know the last thing I see before I fall into a dreamless artificial sleep is Rob Guthard's hand reaching for the rifle. Beep, when my eyes work themselves open. The sun is beginning to set. I been moved. As my vision adjusts, it becomes clear that I am still in the Wrangler, my head resting against a pile of fresh clothes. A soft travel blanket laid across me. I glance around to find that Rob S. nowhere to be seen, momentarily forgetting the situation outside the car. I attempt to call out for him. The syllable catches in my throat as a shambling figure passes by the window, wringing its hands in despair and casting a long shadow through the car. With a renewed sense of caution, I slide the blanket to one side and slowly make my way to the up front. The cabin is similarly empty, except for a single scrap of paper torn from my notebook. It lies on the driver's seat, a small object hidden within the fold. When I open it, I find my headphones and 5 neatly written words. Channel 1 to all cars, my hand starts to shake as I rest the note on the dashboard, slowly climbing through and placing myself gently into the driver's seat, my heart in my throat. I insert the headphones into the jack of the CB radio, take a single, quivering breath in, and press the first button. Beep AS, beep Rob, beep ROB, beep I am sorry, Miss Sharma. Beep AS, beep Rob, where are you? Beep ROB, beep down the road a little. Got myself to one of the rooftops. I know I always hated cities, but once you above it, the view's really something. Beep AS, beep come back Rob, come back. Please beep ROB, beep I wish I could. I do, but we both know those things ain't leavin', and you need the car to get wherever you gotta go, so best I can do is make some ruckus. Draw out of your way. I rest my head against the steering wheel, bracing myself against the weight of his words. Beep AS, beep I can't do this without you. Beep ROB, beep I don't think that S true. Miss Sharma, I think whatever S on this road, it wants you to make it all the way. All I was meant to do was bring you this far. Now you don't have to listen to it. You can turn around and head home. But either way, only one of us is driven out of here. So I guess the only question left is, which way do you want to go? Beep AS, beep well, are you ahead of me or behind me? Beep ROB, beep I can be anywhere. It's your choice. Miss Sharma. In the wake of Rob's words, in the shadow of the decision, I am cast into silence, not because the choice is hard, but because I am ashamed that it is so easy. It was made the moment I first stepped into the Wrangler, and renewed in every perplexing moment since. The need to know, to comprehend, to uncover the truth has been with me all my life. But I never knew its roots ran so deep, that it would endure so ardently when everything else, everyone else, had been stripped away. I stare into the rear-view mirror, seeing myself for the very first time, and I have to admit I am scared. Beep AS, beep stay where you are. Rob, beep ROB, beep ha, okay Miss Sharma, you ready? Beep AS, beep yeah, I am ready. Beep ROB, beep. All right then, suppose it's about time. This thing did some good. The shot explodes through the radio before a faint booming echo reaches me on the quiet city air. Its effect on the city dwellers is immediate. Their collective melancholy shatters in an instant, replaced by a renewed fixation. Before I know it, the disparate crowd unites once more into a stampeding horde, rushing past the windows of the Wrangler and back down the road towards the source of the noise. Beep ROB, beep, they on their way. As the last of the city dwellers disappear behind me, I run my hand across the steering wheel and down to the ignition. Beep AS, beep, yeah, yeah. They re on their way, beep, R-O-B. Beep, okay then. What were you waitin' for? With a fateful twist of the key, the Wrangler roars back to life. The wheels kick against the asphalt, transporting me through the streets of the city as I barrel away from the intersection. I see a small contingent of pursuers rushing around the corner behind me. Rob fires the rifle again, maintaining the attention of the majority. The stragglers fall away in my rear view mirror. Losing ground against the Wrangler, I take the first left, then the next possible right, then another left. A few minutes later, I eventually find myself on the last stretch of road, leading me back into the vast and empty desert. Beep, R-O-B. Beep, so you gonna make it? Beep, A-S. Beep, yeah. I am gonna make it. Beep, R-O-B. Beep, good. That is good. Miss Sharma, if you find Marjorie, if you get a chance to let me know, well, it s more than I deserve. But beep, A-S. Beep, of course. I will. Beep, R-O-B. Beep, I appreciate that. Okay, they gonna be here soon, so I am gonna go radio silent for a while. If I call, you LL know I made it out. If I don't call, you just assume I made it out. Okay. Beep, A-S. Beep, please tell me you're going to be all right, Rob. Beep, R-O-B. Beep, it has been a real honor driven with you, Miss Sharma. The sound of a final shot reverberates through the radio, its echo drowned out by the roaring engine of the Wrangler. The world shifts around me as I burst out of the city and back onto the desert road. The way ahead is laden with immense possibility. Yet, as I disappear into the vastness of the desert, I can only think of what IV left behind. Rob J. Guthard had his flaws, marked by loss, driven by obsession. His good intentions often paving the way to tragedy and heartbreak. As the tears begin to roll down my cheeks, I decide to remember him differently, as a valued friend, a good man, and above all else, a great story no matter how you tell it. Story 2. Around 8 years ago, my daughter went missing. I remember the morning I lost her like it was yesterday. I woke up before my husband, only to find the front door ajar. Panic ran through my veins as I went to check my little girl's bedroom. But Sarah was gone. She was 4 years old. The police searched for months. There was an Amber Alert for her. We put out hundreds of missing persons posters. There were thousands of tips called in, but none of them yielded anything of value. I just couldn't believe that was happening to us. How could the world be so cruel? I, of course, was destroyed. I couldn't sleep, and I barely ate. It got to a point where I was hardly functioning. If it wasn't for my husband, I don't think I would have gotten through it. He was my rock, And while I knew on the inside he was upset, he stayed strong for me. We couldn't both break down. And thankfully, he never lost it like I did. Not in front of me, at least. We'll get through this, he would say. You think she is still out there? I asked. He paused before he answered. I am not sure. I don't know what hurt worse. The possibility that she was alive, but forced to endure an awful situation, or the possibility that she was gone completely. My husband didn't like to talk about it. He shut me down every time I brought it up. We all grieve in our own way. I suppose somehow the hardship brought us closer, while this kind of horror would tear most couples apart. It only made us stronger. It was the way he was there for me, the way he picked me up when I was down. Beep, I made the right choice in a partner, Beep. I thought through it all a few years later. I found out I was pregnant again. I was nervous, feeling as though ID failed once before. My husband reassured me, of course. This time will be different. He stated as though it was a fact I gave birth to another daughter. We named her Jennifer Sarah, after her sister. As she grew, I noticed there were odd similarities between the two. They looked so much alike. They even had similar birthmarks on their cheeks. When ID pulled out a few of Sarah's old toys, it was like Jennifer recognized them. She even gave her dolls the same names that her sister had. They also liked the same foods, loved the same shows, and would even want me to read the same bedtime story. I felt like I was blessed with a second chance. Jennifer was closer to me than she was with her father. He didn't mind, of course. It gave him more time to focus on his work. He was present as a father, but he wasn't really fond of babysitting, as he would call it. To be honest, I think the similarities were too much for him. Maybe it was too painful. I didn't mind, though. I know it as selfish. But I liked the fact she preferred to spend all of her time with me. Once her father had even offered to take her to the park, but she refused. She wanted me to go instead. Yesterday, something very alarming happened. I took Jennifer to the park. It had a large play structure, which she enjoyed, and was surrounded by peaceful woods, which I enjoyed. I watched as she played the same way Sarah did. When I used to take her there, she was headed down the slide when a buzz on my phone distracted me. I pulled it out and saw it was a text from my husband. He was wondering what we were going to do for dinner. I replied quickly, then returned my gaze to the play structure. To my horror, my child was nowhere to be seen. I swear I had only taken my eyes off of her for a second. Not again. I whispered as I frantically began to search for her after running aimlessly through the woods while calling her name. I finally found Jennifer. She was underneath a tree and was digging for something. Jennifer I shouted as I rushed to her. "Mommy," she said as she turned. Her hands were covered in dirt, and she looked worried. "What were you thinking?" I asked as I grabbed her by the shoulders. "Do you know how much you scared me? You could have gotten hurt. Do you understand that? Never run off like that again. I am sorry." She frowned. I hugged her and sighed in relief. "What are you doing out here?" I questioned. She pointed to the hole she had started to dig. I raised my eyebrow curiously and walked over to the shallow pit. "Don T play in the dirt," I said. "I have to keep digging," she exclaimed. "I have to show you." "Show me what?" "Mommy, just keep digging. You have to see. It's a deep hole. I don't know why, but I felt like I had to listen." We stopped by the house and grabbed our shovel. "You want to stay here with Daddy?" I began. "I'll be right back." "No, Mommy, please don't leave me." "I have to be there," she pleaded. "Okay, but you need to stay right next to me." I relented. "No running off. You really scared me." "I know. I'll stay close this time, promise." The two of us headed back to the park. We walked through the woods and found the shallow hole Jen had dug. I began to shovel at it. I don't know how long it took me before I hit something. Maybe it was hours. Little Jennifer did as she was told. She stayed nearby, eating a sandwich, and the snacks I had packed her I dusted off the hard surface I had struck, only to find something that was an off-white color. I dusted away the dirt until I could make out what I was looking at. There, in front of me, was a child-sized skull. Beside it, I saw something shining in the light. I picked it up to reveal it was a butterfly earring. One from a set I'd bought Sarah a few days before she went missing. What the beep? I stammered. "What the beep is this?" "It's me, Mommy." Jennifer started with a mouth full of peanut butter and jelly sandwich. "That's where Daddy left me after he put me to sleep." Story 3. The salt air used to taste like freedom. Now, it tastes like the inside of an old, wet tomb. Eris Thorne had sought solitude when he took the Keeper S post at Farrow's Point Lighthouse. A solitary finger of stone jutting into the perpetually gray North Atlantic. 6 months of wind, waves, and blessed silence, or so he thought it, began with the whispers. Not voices, exactly, more like the idea of sound, seeping through the thick stone walls of the lighthouse tower, or carried on the wind that moaned around the lantern room. At first, Eris dismissed it as the sea playing tricks, the ancient granite settling, or his own mind fraying at the edges after months of isolation. He'd pause while oiling the massive Fresnel lens, hand hovering over the gleaming brass, straining to hear. Nothing, just the rhythmic groan of the turning mechanism, and the endless shush of the surf far below. Then came the cold spots, sudden, intense pockets of frigid air that would bloom in the stairwell, in his cramped quarters, even beside the roaring cast-iron stove. They weren't merely cold, they felt deep, impossibly so, as if he stepped into a chasm bored straight down into the earth's frozen heart. He shiver violently, breath pluming white in the unexpected chill, feeling a profound sense of wrongness, a violation of the lighthouse's meager warmth. The cold lingered, clinging to his skin long after the spot itself warmed, leaving behind a greasy residue of dread. He couldn't wash away. He started dreaming of the deep, not nightmares of drowning, but dreams of vast, lightless spaces where immense, unthinkable shapes drifted in currents older than continents. He'd wake gasping, the taste of brine thick in his mouth, his sheets damp with cold sweat that smelled faintly of ozone and decay. The dreams left him hollowed out, his eyes perpetually shadowed, his movements sluggish. The beam of the lighthouse, sweeping its comforting arc across the dark water, began to feel less like a beacon of safety and more like a desperate, probing searchlight, seeking something it could never hope to understand one blustery Tuesday. The tide went wrong. Eris stood on the narrow iron gallery, encircling the lantern room, buffeted by the gale. Below, the churning sea, usually a chaotic dance of gray and white, suddenly stilled, not calmed, stilled, a perfect, unnatural circle of water, perhaps 100 yards across, directly offshore, became as smooth and dark as polished obsidian. The waves crashed against its edge with a sound like shattering glass, unable to penetrate the eerie calm within. In that unnatural mirror, Eris saw the reflection of the lighthouse, but distorted, elongated, the stone looking porous and rotten, the light a sickly, bruised purple, and beneath that reflection, deep within the dark glass, something immense shifted, a shadow within a shadow, hinting at impossible angles and a crushing, silent mass. It lasted only seconds before the sea roared back, reclaiming its fury. But the image was seared into Eris' mind. The whispers intensified that night, slithering just below the threshold of comprehension, carrying a sense of ancient, indifferent hunger. The subtle manifestations escalated. Supplies delivered by the monthly tender went inexplicably bad, within days canned, goods bloated and burst. Fresh vegetables liquefied into foul-smelling slime. The brass fittings in the lantern room tarnished overnight into a sickly green patina that resembled verdigris. but smelled faintly of iodine and rotting fish. He found strange, wet footprints on the spiral stairs, leading up from the service door, not human, but wide, splayed things with too many indistinct toes, leading upwards from the sea-locked entrance. The salt spray crusting the windows seemed to form patterned spirals, concentric circles, geometries that hurt his eyes to follow, and left him feeling dizzy and nauseous. He tried to radio the mainland. Static, thick, wet, bubbling static that seemed to pulse with a slow, subsonic rhythm that vibrated in his teeth. He tried writing a distress letter, but the ink bled across the page into meaningless, swirling patterns that echoed the salt spray designs on the glass. Panic, cold and sharp, began to crystallize in his chest. Escape wasn't just difficult. It felt fundamentally impossible. The lighthouse, his refuge, had become a prison cell, suspended above an abyss he somehow awakened. Then came the dead things, not washed ashore, but placed. One morning, Eris found a massive, decaying leatherback turtle wedged into the rocky crevices just below the lighthouse door. Its shell was etched with the same spirals he'd seen on the windows. The next day, it was a juvenile sperm whale, impossibly beached on the tiny, jagged skerry beside the point, its colossal eye milky, and staring accusingly at the lighthouse tower. Its blowhole was clogged with a thick, black, tarry substance that reeked of the deep, cold spots. The stench was apocalyptic. The final descent into undeniable horror began with the light itself. The powerful beam, Pharaoh's Point's purpose, started to waver, not flicker like a failing bulb, but pulse with a slow, deliberate rhythm, throbbing like a heartbeat. Eris would stand transfixed in the lantern room, watching the beam cut through the fog. No longer a clean white shaft, but a bruised, purple-tinged light that seemed to push the darkness back only reluctantly, as if the darkness itself were a solid, resistant thing. When the beam swept over the water, the waves beneath it would momentarily still, turning glassy and reflective again. And in those fleeting moments, Eris saw things moving beneath the surface, things that defied shape and scale, glimpses of segmented limbs thicker than his torso, vast, membranous fins that blotted out the seabed, and eyes, countless, lidless eyes, the size of dinner plates, reflecting the lighthouse-esque corrupted beam with cold, alien intelligence. The deep dweller. Didn't he know how he knew the name, but it echoed in the whispers now. A chilling certainty settling into his bones. The whispers became a constant pressure in his skull, a susurrus not just around him, but within him. He stopped sleeping entirely, Food was ash in his mouth. He paced the tower like a trapped animal, his reflection in the salt-rimed windows, gaunt and hollow-eyed. But sometimes, the reflection didn't he match. Sometimes his mirrored eyes would be entirely black, or his mouth would stretch into a rictus grin far too wide for his face. He'd spin around, heart hammering against his ribs, only to find the room empty. The entity wasn't just outside. It was seeping in, violating the very space he occupied, rewriting the rules of his reality one night. During a storm that shrieked like a chorus of the damned, the lighthouse groaned, not the usual settling groan, but a deep, resonant crack that vibrated up through the stone floor into Eris's teeth. He ran to the gallery door, wrenching it open against the gale. Below, the furious sea wasn't just crashing against the rocks. It was climbing. Waves taller than the tower itself rose with impossible slowness, not to crash down, but to hang suspended, forming colossal, dripping walls of water that encircled Pharaoh's Point. They didn't collapse. They held, and within those liquid walls, the deep dweller manifested it, wasn't he a single creature, but a shifting, impossible convergence of shapes and textures, glimpsed through the cascading water, a forest of writhing tentacles thicker than ancient oaks, covered in suckers that pulsed with their own sickly light, armored segments like the carapace of a nightmare crustacean, scaled in plates the size of tombstones that shimmered with impossible colors, and the eyes, countless eyes, large and small, scattered across the formless mass, all fixed on the tiny figure of Eris on the gallery. They held no malice, no rage, only a profound, chilling interest, the way a scientist might regard a specimen pinned to a slide. The sheer scale of it, the utter defiance of biology and physics, struck Eris dumb with terror. This was no ghost, no demon. This was something primordial, something that had slumbered in the crushing dark beneath the continental shelf, since before the first fish crawled onto land, and he had woken it. The lighthouse beam, now a deep, throbbing violet, speared upwards, not cutting the storm clouds, but seeming to feed them, to connect the tower to the entity. In the water the whispers coalesced into a single, crushing thought that slammed into his mind, bypassing his ears. See, Eris stumbled back, slamming the gallery door shut, leaning against it, gasping. He knew then, with absolute, soul-crushing certainty, there was no escape. The tender wouldn't come. The radios wouldn't work. The sea itself was now the deep dweller's domain, and the lighthouse was no longer a structure of stone and glass, but an antenna, a focal point, a beacon he was forced to tend. he wasn't he the keeper of the light. He was its prisoner, its caretaker for something infinitely older and more terrible. He descended the spiral stairs, his legs trembling. The cold spots were everywhere now, constant, leaching the warmth from his bones. The whispers were a constant drone inside his skull, a language of the deep that eroded his thoughts. He passed a porthole and froze, reflected in the thick, salt-crusted glass. Wasn't he his own terrified face? It was something else, something gaunt and hollow-eyed still, yes. But the skin had a gray, waxy sheen like a deep-sea fish. The eyes were entirely black, depthless pools, reflecting the violet light from above. And the mouth was a lipless slit that stretched too wide, revealing rows of needle-like teeth, curved inward. It was him, but not him. It was what the deep dweller was making him, what he would become as it seeped further into the stone, the light. His very being he reached the base of the tower, the heavy door leading to the small service room and the sea-locked entrance. The door was wet, dripping with cold salt water that hadn't he been there moments before, etched into the damp wood, as if carved by invisible claws, was the spiral, the same spiral from the windows, the turtle shell, the ink on his failed letter. It pulsed faintly, with the same rhythm, as the corrupted light above Eris Thorn sank to his knees on the cold stone floor. The storm still howled outside. The waves still hung suspended. The immense presence still watched. The lighthouse beam thrummed overhead. A violet heartbeat in the dark. The whispers inside his skull weren't he just sound anymore. They were becoming his own thoughts. He understood now. There was no relief, no death, only the endless tending of the light, the slow dissolution of Eris into something that served the deep dweller. A flickering sentinel on the edge of an abyss that was no longer outside, but within and all around him. The stone beneath his knees felt porous, yielding, as if the foundation itself was softening, turning into something else. He looked down at his hands. The skin looked gray, damp. He could feel the crushing pressure of the deep, not just around him, but in him. The spiral on the door seemed to deepen, becoming less a carving and more a window, an opening into impossible dark water that stretched down forever. And from that darkness, something vast and patient stirred, not approaching, but simply acknowledging. The keeper was home. The beacon burned, and the deep had only just begun to rise. The last coherent human thought dissolved into the crushing, alien certainty. The light must never go out. It must call them home, forever. Story 4. The first thing Ellis noticed was the silence. not the absence of sound the North Atlantic roared ceaselessly against the black basalt cliffs below Stormhaven Lighthouse, but a kind of silence, a heavy, waiting stillness that settled into the marrow of his bones. The moment the supply boat vanished over the horizon, leaving him alone for his 3-month winter vigil, it was as if the sea itself was holding its breath. Ellis was no stranger to isolation. A decade tending remote lights had etched patience and self-reliance into his weathered face. Stormhaven, however, felt different, older. The granite tower, squat and thick-walled against the perpetual gales, hummed with a deep, subsonic vibration Ellis initially attributed to the wind whistling through unseen fissures. It wasn't wind. It was the lighthouse breathing. The initial signs were subtle, easily dismissed as tricks of the mind or the brutal environment. Ellis would wake in the pre-dawn gloom, certain he heard whispering woven into the crash of waves, not words, but a sibilant susurration like dry sand pouring through an hourglass. He'd find the meticulously swept floor of the lantern room, dusted with fine, gray grit that smelled faintly of ozone and deep-sea decay. Despite the windows being tightly sealed against the salt spray, the beam, his charge, would occasionally flicker, not with power loss, but with a momentary dimming, as if something vast had passed between the light and the endless black water. Then came the patterns in the sand below the lighthouse, accessible only during the lowest spring tides, lay a crescent of dark, volcanic sand. One morning, after a storm that had rattled the tower like a dice cup, Ellis descended the treacherous iron staircase. The storm had scoured the beach clean, yet etched into the damp sand were intricate, swirling designs. They weren't random. They possessed a disturbing geometric precision. Concentric circles spiraling into jagged, non-Euclidean angles that hurt the eyes to follow. They looked ancient, impossibly complex, and utterly wrong. He photographed them, his fingers clumsy with a sudden, inexplicable chill, by the time he returned with a sketchpad. The tide was rising, and the patterns were already dissolving, smoothed away by the waves, as if they'd never been that night. The silence deepened. The roaring sea seemed muffled, distant, as if heard through thick felt. The subsonic hum within the lighthouse intensified, vibrating the mug on his nightstand until the water inside shivered. Ellis sat at his small desk, poring over the blurry photos of the sand patterns. He'd found an old, water-stained journal in the lighthouse library, penned by a keeper named Silas Crow from the 1890s. Crow's spidery script spoke of the hollowing, a name he'd heard whispered on the wind. a name for the presence he believed inhabited the deep trench off Stormhaven Point. "It watches," Crow wrote, his handwriting becoming increasingly frantic, not with eyes, but with the lack. "It drinks the silence between waves, the stillness before the storm. It hungers for resonance, for the echoes we leave behind." Dellis scoffed, but a cold knot tightened in his stomach. He remembered the heavy stillness of his first day, the feeling of being listened to. By the emptiness the manifestations escalated. Ellis began finding small, smooth stones placed deliberately on his windowsill. Stones that hadn't been there before, cold as glacial ice to the touch. The smell of ozone and deep decay grew stronger, clinging to his clothes, invading his nostrils even in the sealed living quarters. He'd hear footsteps on the iron stairs when he knew he was utterly alone, slow, dragging steps that stopped just outside his door. Once, waking from a fitful sleep, he saw a dark, elongated silhouette against his moonlit window, impossibly tall and thin, its outline seeming to waver and fracture like heat haze. It was gone. When he blinked, he tried radioing the mainland. Static roared back, dense and impenetrable, swallowing his words whole. His carefully maintained chronometer began losing time, then gaining it erratically. The beam flickered more frequently, the periods of dimness lasting longer. During these dimmings, the silence became absolute, a suffocating blanket. Ellis felt a profound existential dread, a sense of being unmade, atom by atom. In that absence of sound and light, he started talking to himself, just to hear a voice, any voice, but his own words sounded thin and hollow. Quickly absorbed by the oppressive quiet, the journal became his morbid obsession. Crow described similar experiences. The stones, the smell, the footsteps. "It learns you," Crow had scrawled. The ink blotched with what looked like tears or seawater. "It learns the shape of your fear, the rhythm of your breath, the vibration of your voice. It learns to wear you like a skin." The final entry, dated just before the new moon in December 1898, was a single, trembling sentence. "It S in the walls. It S in the stones. It S in the silence between my heartbeats." Ellis checked the almanac. The new moon was 3 days away. Panic, cold and sharp, finally pierced his stoicism. Escape. He had to get to the emergency skiff moored in the sheltered cove on the leeward side. It meant traversing the treacherous rocks below the lighthouse. During low tide, the morning of the new moon dawned gray and still. The sea was unnervingly calm, a vast sheet of leaden glass. The silence was profound, heavier than ever, pressing in on Ellis' eardrums until they ached. he packed a small bag water, flares, the journal, and descended the iron stairs, his boots ringing unnaturally loud in the unnatural hush. The rocks were slick with seaweed and treacherous. Ellis moved with agonizing slowness. The vast, silent expanse of the ocean stretching out beside him, seeming to watch. He was halfway to the cove when he saw them. Patterns, not in the sand, but etched into the very basalt rock underfoot. The same swirling, impossible geometries he'd seen on the beach, but carved deep into the stone, as if by immense, unimaginable heat or pressure. They pulsed with a faint, sickly phosphorescence, visible only in the dim light. They hadn't been there yesterday. A wave, silent and far larger than the calm sea should allow, surged up the rocks without warning. It didn't crash, it flowed, thick and dark like oil, soaking Ellis to the waist. It receded just as silently, leaving behind not foam, but that same fine gray grit that smelled of deep decay. And clinging to his oilskin trousers, tangled around his legs, were strands of thick, dark seaweed. Except it wasn't seaweed. It was hair, long, coarse, and unmistakably human. Ellis retched, scrambling backwards, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. That S when he heard it, not a whisper, not a roar, but a voice. It came from everywhere and nowhere, from the rocks, the air, the water, the lighthouse towering above. It was a monstrous parody of sound, grating and dissonant, yet horribly familiar. It was his voice, but warped, slurred, speaking words he muttered to himself in the lonely nights, fragments of fear, curses against the isolation. Cold, so cold, the Ellis voice groaned from the rocks beside him. Who is there? Footsteps, always footsteps. It echoed from the still water surface. It wasn't mimicking him. It was replaying him. Echoes of his own terror, harvested from the silence. He ran, slipping, stumbling, driven by primal terror towards the skiff. The cove came into view, the small boat bobbing gently. Hope, desperate and fragile, flared. He reached the pebbled shore. Lunging for the boat's painter, his hand closed on nothing. The rope was there, thick and salt-crusted, but his fingers passed through it like smoke. He looked down at his hands. They seemed solid, yet the rope remained untouched. He tried to step into the boat. His foot sank through the gunwale as if it were mist. Panic became pure. Icy horror. He turned. The lighthouse stood stark against the gray sky, and standing on the highest balcony of the lantern room, leaning against the railing, was a figure, tall, impossibly thin, its outline blurred and shifting like a heat mirage. It wore oilskins. It had Ellis' face, but the eyes where eyes should be, were only deep, empty hollows that seemed to drink the feeble light. It raised a hand, Ellis' hand, in a slow, deliberate wave of pure, silent negation washed over Ellis. Not sound, but the absence of all vibration, all resonance. He felt it not in his ears, but in his bones, his teeth, the very core of his being. He felt himself unraveling, his sense of self, his memories, his fear, all began to bleed away, siphoned into the crushing silence. He wasn't being killed. He was being erased. Hollowed out, he stumbled back, away from the illusory boat, away from the cove. There was nowhere to go. The patterns on the rocks glowed brighter. The thing wearing his face watched from above, its hollow gaze fixed upon him. The silence deepened, becoming absolute. A vacuum that pulled at his soul Ellis opened his mouth to scream, to shatter the terrible quiet with one final, defiant sound. But no sound came out. His throat was raw, but silent. The silence wasn't outside anymore. It was inside him, filling the spaces where his thoughts, his memories, his very identity had been. He looked down at his hands again. They were beginning to look insubstantial. Translucent, he turned towards the vast, silent, watching sea. The Journal S final warning echoed in the hollowed-out chamber of his fading mind. It learns to wear you, like a skin. The thing on the lighthouse balcony smiled with Ellis' lips, below, standing ankle-deep in the lifeless water. Ellis felt the last echo of his terror fade into the endless, hungry silence. He was becoming part of it, part of the hollowing, another whisper in the rocks, another phantom footstep on the iron stairs, another flicker in the dying light. His final, horrifying understanding wasn't that he was trapped, but that he was already gone. Only the silence remained, and in that silence, something ancient and ravenous stirred, satisfied, already listening for the next lonely keeper, the next echo to consume. The lighthouse beam flickered once, a feeble protest against the encroaching dark, then went out completely. Stormhaven Point belonged to the deep silence now, and the thing that wore Ellis' face watched the empty sea, waiting. The patterns on the rocks pulsed softly in the gloom, a map to an unthinkable void. The sea didn't roar. It listened, and it had teeth. Story 5. The silence of the Antarctic night was absolute. A physical weight pressing against the reinforced walls of Station Borealis. Dr. Eris Thorne, glaciologist and pragmatist, stared at the seismic readouts scrolling across his monitor. The anomaly had persisted for weeks now. A rhythmic, impossibly deep thrum emanating from beneath 3 kilometers of pristine ice. It wasn't tectonic. The signature was all wrong, too regular, too deliberate. His initial skepticism had curdled into a gnawing unease, a feeling that intensified every time he looked at the waveform. It felt less like geology and more like a heartbeat. The vast, indifferent cold outside seemed to listen. His colleague, Lena Vance, an astrophysicist whose eyes usually held the spark of cosmic wonder, now reflected the sterile glow of her spectral analysis screen. "It's not just seismic, Eris," she murmured, her voice hushed, as if afraid the ice itself might hear. "There's an M signature piggybacking on it. Low frequency, complex modulation. It's structured like data. Data." Eris scoffed, the sound unnaturally loud in the cramped lab. From what? Some prehistoric whale singing lullabies to the mantle. Lena didn't smile. Her finger traced a complex, non-repeating pattern on the screen. "No, this isn't biological. It's artificial, or something else entirely. It resonates at frequencies we can barely detect, let alone interpret. It's like trying to read Shakespeare through a keyhole while blindfolded." A shiver ran through her, unrelated to the station's efficient but constant chill. "It feels old, Eris. Impossibly old. The discovery had been accidental. A routine ice core drilling operation, hitting something impossibly hard and dense, far below the projected bedrock. Then the thrumming started. Funding poured in, priorities shifted. The mission became singular. Reach the source. Now, weeks later, the massive thermal drill, a beast of hydraulics and laser cutters nicknamed Mole, had finally breached the final layer commander, Elias Vance. Lena's stoic brother and the Station S leader entered the control room, his face grim. Mole S through. Video feed is nominal. We resending the probe down the borehole. He didn't meet their eyes. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. The vast, indifferent universe outside, glimpsed through the reinforced viewport. A canvas of stars, so numerous they blurred into milk, suddenly felt like the backdrop. To an execution the probe descended, kilometers of ice, illuminated by its powerful lights, streamed past the monitors, a mesmerizing tunnel of blue-white oblivion. Then the ice gave way to nothingness. A cavern of staggering size opened below. The probe S lights, designed to illuminate ice cores, barely scratched the darkness. They revealed only fragments, smooth, curved surfaces that defied perspective, angles that seemed subtly wrong, making the eyes water. It wasn't rock. It was metallic or ceramic, or something else blacker than the surrounding void, absorbing light hungrily, "Steady, bring it lower," Elias commanded. His knuckles white on the console, the probe descended further, its lights finally striking something solid below. Not a floor, but a structure. It rose from the cavern-s depths, colossal and incomprehensible. It wasn't a building. It lacked symmetry, purpose, or any recognizable architecture. It was a tangle of cyclopean pillars, twisted spirals that seemed to phase in and out of visibility, surfaces inscribed with geometries that pulsed with a faint internal light, the symbols wherein T etched. They seemed to writhe beneath the surface, shifting like living things. They hurt to look at. The shear scale was vertiginous. The probe was an insect crawling on a god-s discarded toy. My God, Lena breathed. Her earlier scientific detachment shattered. Her voice trembled. What is it? Eris felt his stomach drop, the rhythmic thrumming, now transmitted through the probe-s sensors as a deep, physical vibration they could feel in their bones, intensified. It resonated with the structure. It was the structure, or the structure was its source. The M signature, Lena, detected spiked, flooding the monitors with chaotic, beautiful, terrifying patterns. It transmitting, Lena whispered, mesmerized and horrified. Not to us, through us. We read just background noise, static on a cosmic radio. The probe panned its camera between two impossibly angled monoliths. Something shifted, not movement as they understood it. It was more like a section of reality itself flexing. A shape coalesced from the oppressive darkness vast, multi-limbed, yet formless. It wasn't solid, nor gaseous, but existed in a state that flickered between dimensions. Tentacles of pure shadow, threaded with impossible colors that had no name, writhed silently. It had no eyes, yet Eris felt an overwhelming sense of being observed, not by intelligence, but by something as indifferent as gravity. It was an entity, or perhaps merely a localized phenomenon, existing on a scale that rendered humanity insignificant. It wasn't malevolent. It was beyond such concepts. It simply was a function of the universe, as natural and uncaring as a black hole. Get it out, Elias barked, panic finally cracking his composure. Retract the probe, now. But it was too late. The entity, or the space it occupied, reacted, not to the probe, but perhaps to the faint electromagnetic signature of its transmission. A gnat buzzing near a slumbering leviathan, a limb or a tendril of distorted space-time, lashed out with impossible speed, not towards the probe, but through it. The screen dissolved into static, then went black. The deep thrumming faltered for a single, terrifying heartbeat, then resumed, unchanged, indifferent silence descended in the control room, broken only by the frantic beeping of dead equipment and the ragged breaths of the 3 scientists. The vastness they always intellectually acknowledged the billions of galaxies, the trillions of stars, suddenly wasn't an abstract concept. It was a crushing, suffocating reality embodied by that thing in the dark. Humanity wasn't just small. It was irrelevant. Dust motes dancing in a beam of light. Unaware the sun was about to explode, Lena started to laugh. A high-pitched, broken sound that held no humor, only the ragged edges of a shattered mind. It didn't even see us. She gasped between hysterical giggles. To probe our signals, we were less than static, less than dust. She clawed at her temples, her eyes wide and unfocused, staring not at the blank screen, but at some internal vista of cosmic desolation. Eris felt something vital tear inside him. His life's work, understanding the earth. Its systems felt like a child stacking pebbles while ignoring the ocean about to swallow the shore. The comforting narratives of science, exploration, even human significance, evaporated like mist. The universe wasn't just vast. It was alive with forces and entities operating on scales and logics utterly alien to human comprehension. And they didn't care. They couldn't care. Humanity was a fleeting chemical reaction on an insignificant speck of ice. The knowledge they sought, the truth buried beneath the Antarctic ice, was never meant for minds like theirs. It was a glimpse behind the curtain of reality, revealing not a wizard, but the cold, infinite machinery of existence itself. Elias slumped in his chair, his face ashen. The commander, the man of action, looked utterly broken. "We have to seal it," he mumbled, his voice hollow. "Pour concrete down the borehole. Bury it. Bury everything." But Eris knew it was futile. You couldn't bury the sky. You couldn't unsee the void. The thrumming continued. A constant, deep vibration transmitted through the station's structure. A reminder of the Leviathan slumbering below. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact, like the background radiation of the universe. It simply existed. The knowledge was inside them now. A psychic contamination. They had reached out for understanding and touched the abyss. The abyss hadn't noticed, but its touch had been corrosive. Lena's laughter subsided into choked sobs, then a terrifying silence. She sat perfectly still, rocking slightly, her eyes fixed on the frozen wasteland outside the viewport, not at the stars, but at the featureless ice sheet stretching to the horizon, a thin, fragile crust over an immeasurable, indifferent dark Harris looked at his hands, tools of exploration, instruments of measurement. They felt alien now, useless appendages on a creature, suddenly aware of its own microscopic fragility. The silence in the room, wasn't just an absence of sound. It was the silence of the void they had inadvertently acknowledged. It pressed in, colder than the Antarctic night, filled with the echo of that monstrous heartbeat from below, and the terrifying revelation it carried. Humanity's story was a footnote in a cosmic text written in a language no human mind could ever decipher, by authors who wouldn't recognize the page. The horror wasn't just in what they'd seen, but in the fundamental shift of understanding the crushing, permanent realization of their own sublime insignificance. The vastness hadn't just confronted them, it had swallowed them whole, leaving only hollow shells trembling in the dark, forever listening to the indifferent rhythm of a universe that didn't know they existed, and the thrumming, the deep, resonant thrumming, it never stopped. It was the sound of the world turning, oblivious, above something ancient and utterly, terrifyingly other. Story 6. The wind howled across the frozen expanse of the Thule Plateau, a sound like the grinding of forgotten bones inside the geodesic dome of Station Borealis. The air hummed with the low thrum of generators and the brittle tension of anticipation. Dr. Aris Thorne, a glaciologist whose eyes held the weary wisdom of 2 decades, drilling into the Earth's icy memory, stared at the core sample displayed on the high-resolution monitor. It wasn't the expected layers of compressed snow and ancient air bubbles that held his gaze. It was the thing trapped within the ice, 3.2 kilometers down. It's anomalous, breathed Lena Petrova, the team's astrophysicist. Her voice, usually crisp and confident, held a tremor. The spectral analysis doctor. Thorne. It doesn't correspond to anything in our databases. Not mineral, not organic, not even close. The core section on screen held a fragment no larger than a fingernail clipping, but it pulsed with a subtle internal light, a color that defied description. It wasn't violet or indigo, but something other, a hue the human eye strained to perceive, and the mind recoiled from naming. Looking at it felt like staring into a gaping wound in reality itself. It emitted a faint, subsonic resonance that vibrated the fillings in Thorne's teeth. A constant, unsettling thrum beneath the station's mechanical sounds. They drilled deeper than ever before, seeking pristine ice cores dating back millions of years. Instead, they deep-breached a pocket of impossible antiquity, sealed beneath layers untouched by any known epoch. The fragment wasn't ice. It was a shard of something else, something inserted. The surrounding ice, muttered Dr. Elevance, the materials scientist, his face pale under the sterile lab lights. It has altered, molecular structure reconfigured, stable but exhibiting properties Christ. It s, like the laws of physics, are bent around this thing. He tapped a keyboard, pulling up a complex molecular model. Look at the hydrogen bonds. They re-singing, resonating with that signal. The signal. That was what they started, calling the low-frequency vibration, emanating from the shard, initially dismissed as equipment noise. It had persisted, growing subtly louder, more insistent. It wasn't he heard so much as felt a pressure behind the eyes, a tightening in the chest, a sense of profound, directionless dread that seeped into the marrowlina, isolated the signal, filtering out the station's background noise. What emerged wasn't random static. It possessed a terrifying, complex structure, fractal patterns, that spiraled into infinite, dizzying recursion. Harmonies clashing in dissonant chords that scraped against the soul. It wasn't music. It was mathematics made audible, a language of angles and dimensions the human brain couldn't parse. Listening to it for more than a few minutes induced migraines, nausea, and vivid, unsettling dreams of vast, geometric voids and entities that moved like shattered constellations. It as a beacon, Lena whispered one night, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, her hands trembling as she clutched a mug of cold coffee, or a key, or maybe just noise, meaningless static from something so vast. It doesn't he know we rehear, doesn't he care. That was the first crack, the realization of utter insignificance. They were scientists, masters of their domains, unravelers of nature's secrets, confronted with this shard, this signal. They were suddenly children, stumbling through a dark, incomprehensible cathedral built for gods whose thoughts were galaxies. The vastness of space, once a canvas of wonder, now felt like an oppressive, uncaring abyss. The comforting hum of the station's life support became the fragile bubble protecting them from a vacuum filled with things. Thorne felt it most acutely. The ice, his life's work, his trusted archive, had become treacherous. Every core sample now felt like a potential doorway. He wake in the dead of the polar night, convinced the walls of his quarters were breathing, subtly shifting, the shadows coalescing into impossible, non-Euclidean shapes that vanished when he turned on the light. The constant subsonic thrum vibrated in his skull, making concentration impossible. he started seeing patterns in the frost on the Windows complex, disturbing geometries that mirrored the signal S structurally Vance retreated into obsessive analysis, his meticulous nature fracturing under the strain. He spent hours staring at the molecular models, muttering about transdimensional leakage and reality shearing. He became convinced the shard was actively rewriting the local laws of physics, a cancer spreading through space-time from its icy prison. One morning, they found him in the lab, frantically scribbling equations on the walls with a marker, his eyes wild, repeating, "It S, not in the ice is in it. We re inside. We've always been inside." Lena, trying to maintain scientific detachment, focused on the signal S source. She triangulated it, not through space, but through complex resonance patterns within the shard itself. Her calculations pointed outwards, not to a point in the sky, but to a specific, shifting locus within the fabric of space-time itself, a locus that was drawing nearer. Her instruments detected subtle gravitational anomalies, minute ripples in the cosmic microwave background radiation that pulsed in sync with the shard S resonance. Something vast, older than stars, was responding. Approaching the psychological toll was corrosive. Paranoia festered. Minor disagreements escalated into shouting matches. Sleep became a battleground haunted by shared nightmares. Visions of colossal, silent shapes drifting through interstellar dust. Structures built on scales that dwarfed solar systems, and a chilling sense of being observed by intellects as vast and indifferent as the void itself. The insignificance wasn't just theoretical. It was a crushing weight. Their lives, their struggles, their entire civilization meaningless motes of dust in a cosmic storm. The final descent began subtly. The station lights began to flicker erratically, not due to power failure, but as if reality itself was stuttering. Screens displayed impossible geometries before melting into static. Temperature readings fluctuated wildly without environmental cause. The air grew thick, heavy, tasting metallic and strangely old. The subsonic thrum intensified, vibrating the floor plates, making their teeth ache and their vision blur. The unnameable color emanating from the shard seemed to bleed into the surroundings, staining the sterile white lab with its impossible hue. Then the whispers started, not auditory hallucinations, but thoughts that guarantee their own, bubbling up from the deepest, darkest wells of the subconscious, fragments of concepts too vast and alien to grasp, memories of stars being born in agony, the slow, cold death of entropy, the indifferent gaze of entities that existed outside time. The whispers spoke of the shard not as an object, but as a syllable in an unimaginably vast cosmic language, a language describing truths that would shatter the human mind. "It is here," Lena gasped, clutching her head, tears streaming down her face as the alien thoughts crashed against her sanity. Data streams on her monitor dissolved into cascades of the unnameable color and fractal patterns. It is not coming to us, it is unfolding around us. We were perceiving a fraction of its passage. Outside, the perpetual Arctic night deepened impossibly. The stars didn't just vanish. They seemed to be extinguished, swallowed by an encroaching absence darker than any void. The wind died, replaced by an eerie, suffocating silence, broken only by the now deafening thrum of the shard and the frantic pounding of their own hearts. The air pressure dropped, making their ears pop painfully. Frost bloomed in intricate, impossible patterns across the interior of the dome, glowing faintly with that same wrong color. Thorn stumbled towards the observation blister, drawn by a horrifying compulsion. He pressed his face against the freezing plexiglass. The aurora borealis, usually a celestial ballet of light, was gone. Instead, the sky was dominated by something. It wasn't a shape. It was an absence of shape, a tear in the fabric of the night. Within that tear swam impossible geometries, angles that couldn't exist, structures that folded in on themselves infinitely, surfaces that seemed both near and impossibly distant. It pulsed with the same unnameable color, radiating pure, alien indifference. This wasn't an invasion. It wasn't malice. It was simply existence on a scale that rendered humanity irrelevant, a cosmic phenomenon passing by, its wake disturbing the local reality like a ship disturbs water. Utterly unaware of the microbes clinging to a speck of dust within that disturbance, the shard was merely a resonant fragment, a speck of dust vibrating in sympathy with the leviathans. Passage the revelation struck Thorn with the force of a physical blow. They hadn't discovered forbidden knowledge. They had been noticed by it, and being noticed by something so vast, so utterly other, was annihilation, not of the body, but of the soul, of the comforting illusion of meaning and significance. He felt his mind fraying at the edges. Concepts like self, purpose, and future dissolving into the terrifying, infinite indifference radiating from the sky. He understood with horrifying clarity the true nature of the universe. A cold, uncaring expanse where life was a fleeting accident, a momentary flicker against an eternal, silent dark. Humanity wasn't special. It was nothing, less than nothing behind him. Illy Vance began to laugh a high, hysterical sound that cracked into sobs. He clawed at his own face, babbling about the skin of the world being thin, about seeing the angles beneath. Lena sat slumped before her terminal, now a swirling vortex of the unnameable color and fractal static, her eyes vacant, a thin line of drool tracing down her chin. The signal wasn't just in the air. It was inside them now, rewriting their neural pathways, dissolving their humanity into the cosmic static the entity, or the wake of its passage began to recede. The tear in the sky slowly knitted itself back into the familiar, starless Arctic night. The oppressive pressure lifted. The subsonic thrum faded to a faint, persistent buzz deep within their bones. The unnameable glow from the shard dimmed. Though it never entirely vanished, silence descended upon Station Borealis, thick and heavy as the ice outside. But it was a different silence now. The comforting hum of machinery was gone, replaced by the hollow ringing of profound absence. The three survivors didn't move. They barely breathed. Thorn turned from the window. His reflection in the darkened plexiglass showed a face aged decades in hours, eyes hollow and filled with a knowledge that was less understanding and more a gaping wound. He looked at Lena, her brilliant mind shattered, reduced to rocking gently and humming a discordant fragment of the signal. He looked at Ellie, curled into a fetal position, whispering about the cold angles that lived inside the walls. Now the horror wasn't over. It was just beginning. The shard remained, pulsing softly in its containment field, a permanent scar on their reality. The signal, though quieter, was a constant vibration in the fabric of their being, a reminder echoing in their very cells. They had peered into the abyss, and the abyss hadn't blinked. It hadn't even seen them, and that was the most terrifying revelation of all. The universe was vast beyond comprehension, ancient beyond measure, and utterly, chillingly indifferent to the fleeting sparks of awareness huddled on a speck of frozen dust. They were changed irrevocably. They carried the void inside them now. The knowledge they had stumbled upon wasn't power. It was poison. A poison that dissolved the comforting illusions of meaning and significance, leaving only the vast, silent, uncaring dark. The Arctic night stretched on, infinite and cold, mirroring the emptiness that now yawned within their souls. The station lights flickered once more, then died completely, plunging them into a darkness that felt less like an absence of light and more like the true, indifferent face of the cosmos. And in that perfect, suffocating dark, the faint, unnameable glow from the lab pulsed on, a single, mocking eye in the endless night.